story. EFF leader Julius Malema has accused President Cyril Ramaphosa and government of running down state institutions and says Ramaphosa must resign as a result. The EFF held a nationwide protest calling for the president to resign and for an end to load shedding. The demonstrations saw some businesses close for the day and some barricading their doors.
All over South Africa, the fighters have come under one umbrella and they are saying, well, enough is enough. I told you in the morning that it is only us who can do that. I heard him pretending saying the ANC can't do that. The former ANC can do that, not the ANC of this one. They will never do what we've done today. Hey, at 2 o'clock, you are told you are no longer getting buses. Before that, the taxi said to us, it's business as usual, leave our taxis alone. And then you still come the way you came in your numbers. When the state machinery, all of it, is declared on you. The soldiers, the police, the buses, everything that is sponsored by state, stay away from those people. They've got leprosy. You'll be affected. And they all stayed away. Only progressive bus owners and taxi owners who are fighters themselves said to us, we will bring our buses. We don't care what they are saying. So, you don't know what we go through. Every day, a senior counsel, like when I finish speaking here, a senior counsel is convened to sit down and analyze word for word what I said, and then tell them if I can't be prosecuted on crimes against the state, just find something against him. Just find something against him. Every day, they meet from 6 until very late at night. They play my speeches word for word. Find something against him. We want to arrest him.
And of course, we are, as we said earlier on, that we're going to be looking at the economic impact of this shutdown, as we've continued to hear from our reporters throughout the day, as they were giving us, of course, different leaders of the economic freedom fighters talking about the impact of the strike, also listening to the minister and the presidency giving us her own sense from where government stands on this particular shutdown. But let's look at this economic impact further now with the RMB Chief Economist and Head of Research, Isaah Mhlanga. Thank you so much, Mr. Mhlanga, for your time. EFF leader Julius Malema says this shutdown was effective on the economic front and that things were brought to a standstill. Was it?
Look, I think if we look relative to other strikes before, we had continued activity across, most businesses. What we see because of the work from home phenomenon, all businesses that could work from home, they continue to work from home. But I think just to provide context, if we just take last year or 2022's total size of the economy is 4.6 trillion, which equates to roughly about 1.2 trillion per quarter. And that then gives us about, let's say 12 billion per day. That is the size of the potential impact, but because many businesses could continue to work, the impact is it's not as large as what you would have perceived. But also the strike was not violent, which means it has less of a bad perception as what we used to see from similar strikes before.
And I'm going to come to that in just a moment. But there have been some that have said that although, some businesses were able to continue, but there could be some aftershocks that we could see at a later stage. Could we?
It's always possible, especially if there are any vandalism of property, which we didn't see, which means it's going to be less impact than what it would have been with vandalism of property. But I think the bigger one is what it does to sentiment globally. As far as it can change sentiment to, negative in a way that dissuades foreign investors from investing in the country, that can have an impact. But strikes are not unique to South Africa. We see them across many other countries. France is currently experiencing one of the most violent strikes in recent history. This just says it's something that happens in many countries, as long as it's not violent, as long as there is no destruction of property, and as long as it's not protracted, it should not have a dire impact.
So do you think, the sentiment internationally may not be as negative as some are fearing it might be, given what we saw, as you say, playing out in the streets, not necessarily violent?
No, I'm not convinced that it will be overly negative. If it were to be the equivalent of the July 2021 riots, that would have been significantly negative. But as we saw today, at least in Gauteng, it was not as bad as what we had expected, at least what would have been feared it could be. So international investors are also quite alive to the fact that they see these sort of strikes in many countries, not just in South Africa. So they know they happen. As long as it does not damage property, as long as the rule of law is maintained, as long as it's not protracted, then they can just discount this out.
Did we see any movement on the market?
No, not because of South Africa's issues. It is driven largely by what's happening in the US banking sector with the failure of 3 regional banks, but also driven by the sentiment coming out of Europe because of the takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS. But we have seen some stabilization in markets because policymakers, particularly central bankers, they have come in support of the banking sector, introducing a significant amount of liquidity, opening swap lines between the major global banks to make sure that there is constant flow of US dollars in the financial system. That has helped to at least reduce the level of volatility that we are seeing. So what we see in markets today is not necessarily driven by events that are taking place locally. They're driven by global events.
And, back home, of course, there have been various conversations with different people on the ground. But, strikingly, some of these small businesses talk about the impact of a day like today and how they continue now to really buckle under the pressure to try and absorb some of the shocks they found themselves going through. You think of rolling blackouts, you think of the unrest, you think of so much that is happening. And now this. How bad will things be for them?
For small businesses, the impact is likely to be bigger than what we see for medium and established businesses. Remember, if we just take, for instance, a mother that is selling fat cakes on the side of the road, they could not operate today, which means they will have to start again to restock. Normally, they use today's money to go and restock for tomorrow. So if they couldn't operate today, tomorrow they might likely not have enough funds to start again. So that impact is much bigger for the small, medium enterprise or for the individual proprietors that operate from hand to mouth.
And what does that then mean when one looks at it in the context of the numbers that we're seeing on the jobs front? I mean, unemployed people all over, and really those concerning numbers there. Now, if you do have small businesses who also create some of the jobs, having to deal with a day like today, it certainly is not going to be easy going forward.
It's not going to be easy, but we have to be quite careful because this is a one-day strike that we think is not going to be protracted. It's not going to be there tomorrow and the day after. So we should not extrapolate a one-day strike and the disruption that has been there over one day to much of the year. A lot of these things are going to reverse quickly enough.
And I suppose then when, also one looks at another, thing that South Africans are now talking about a lot is the fact that the impact of rolling blackouts also appears to not be felt that much today. And should that trend continue, it could also be good when it comes to businesses to be able to assist them to recover, because that's one of the areas that also hit them hard.
Absolutely. As far as load shedding is concerned, it has been a mega shock for South African businesses. Just to give you some perspective, when foreign businesses went into Nigeria, they expected not to have constant supply of electricity. So they came up with solutions to be able to operate in that economy. What South African businesses have always assumed as a permanent feature of the economy is constant supply of electricity, which meant when we could not have it, they had to start thinking about how do they operate in an environment where electricity is no longer guaranteed. But I think we have seen businesses, come up with solutions, be it generators for small, medium enterprises, which is costly, and it's actually resulting in an increase in prices in sectors such as food, for instance. But for larger businesses that have, bought generators, they use diesel to continue to operate, but it comes at a significant cost. That we need not have to if we had enough electricity. But if you just look in terms of the imports of solar panels, which shows us that there is a lot of off-the-grid solutions that are not synchronized because we don't have transmission lines that will help to mitigate part of the impact of load shedding going forward. It's quite significant. In a year or two, it should alleviate significantly what we are seeing today.
And certainly, one hopes that, those efforts continue, because a lot of people talking about just the impact of these rolling blackouts alone, having been huge on their businesses. Mr. Mhlanga, thank you so much. We do appreciate your time here on the show. And that is RMB Chief Economist and Head of Research, Isaah Mhlanga. Do appreciate your time. Let's take then a short break. When we come back, we'll continue then to monitor developments on another developing story, and this around former President Jacob Zuma and the developments around the private prosecution matter.